Hi, my name's Garrett Wilson, and today I'm going to be doing a video book review over Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Written in 1952, over 60 years later, I'm here to tell you that this book is still relatable. I first thought that this book was fiction, and so how relatable could it be? But further research into Ralph Ellison's life I realized that when he wrote the book, he was relating to his own life then. For example, Ellison's father was a son of a former slave who died at age 3. The narrator in the book is very independent, only mentions his family a couple times to say he misses them, and we can assume that Ellison grew up more independent than most without a prominent father figure in his life. Ellison himself goes to Tuskegee, which is an HBCU, just like our narrator, who goes to an all-black college. And both of those colleges the narrator and Ellison attend have prominent founder figures. The narrator's goes nameless, but Ellison's is Booker T. Washington. And also, both left college without a degree. Ellison actually does leave Tuskegee without receiving a college degree. So you can see from the very beginning of this time the book was written, it does apply to Ellison's life, and Ellison's telling a story that you can believe to be, true and believable. But one might think that I might think, I'm white and it's 2016, how relatable can this be? Well, Ellison himself says in an interview, literature is integrated, and I'm not just talking about color, race. I'm talking about the power of literature to make us recognize again and again the wholeness of the human experience. Ellison right there just says that even though the book was written from a black perspective, like it only could have been to be so good, it's not an experience that only black people can feel. All people of human, he says, writes about the human experience, feel whatever he's talking about in the book and experience it, and therefore we can relate it to our own lives no matter what color or race or religion we are. Another kind of to expand on that, the first word of the book is I, and the last word of the book is you. So Ellison might be saying I and giving the whole book, giving his experience of a black narrative, but the last word being you, he kind of transfers the thought process onto the reader, the audience, saying like, how does this relate to their own life? A big theme I found in the book that I still feel is very relevant today is the debate on how to deal with racism. Our narrator throughout the novel runs into a good bit of racism, whether he's in New York or at the college or any place he goes. But what really makes it very interesting is how he decides to deal with racism. And he comes in contact with a lot of people that have very different ideas, one being a violent approach and one being a very non-violent approach. The violent approach in the book can be seen by people such as Roz the Extorter, who during the Harlem riots at the end is riding around on a horse with a spear, enticing the rioters to fight back to the police, and throughout the novel is always enticing for violence. That similar side can be seen with leaders along the way to now, such as Malcolm X, who promoted doing what you have to do to make it, and also in current day, such as the riots in Baltimore that took place after the shooting of Mike Brown in Missouri. There were very many riots in Missouri, and currently right now at this day in St. Louis there's a lot of race riots going on. It mimics exactly what happened in Harlem, and in both places it really doesn't matter what the jury or courts decide. People are going to riot out of excitement and instinct and what they believe is right. Just like in Harlem when our narrator is asking why people are rioting, and he's given several different answers with none being very clear. On the other hand, the other approach is being a non-violent. Others try to deal with race relations peacefully. Examples of this are our narrator's grandfather, who keeps telling him to yes him to death and undermine him with agreeing with him, and examples like that. A good example today in our society is Obama, who has made it all the way to the top, and I wouldn't say it's yesing with the white man, but it was definitely not a violent approach. It was a very peaceful approach, and one that had to do with understanding. He made it to the leader of the free world and is in the White House, which was built by slaves, even though he was born in 1961 when separate and equal was around. An example of him doing this was after the Trayvon Martin shooting in Florida. Many black people were very upset, and many white people too, but a bigger majority of white people didn't understand or was not upset as black people about the shooting. And Obama publicly said, those sets of experiences inform how the African American community interprets what happened one night in Florida. And that was Obama explaining the views that black people are feeling about this, because they are going to be different from white people because they've experienced many different things. And earlier in that speech, Obama had talked about being followed when he goes into stores, and storekeepers when he goes in a gas station keeping their eyes on him, and just kind of stereotypical things that lead him to believe what he believes and what black people believe, all in an effort to make whites and blacks and all races blend together rather than drift apart. Another theme that I found in the book that is still very relevant to today is the identity issues that our narrator went through. In the book, he had several different jobs as a driver in college, or a painter, or a speaker. Finding one's identity is a huge problem in this book in 1952, and it's a huge problem today for people of all ages, from a teenager all the way up to an adult. And it's very visible here, even in the college setting. You see athletes here whose parents have pushed them into sports their whole life, and they don't even know if that's what they want, but they know that's what their parents want, it's what they've been forced to do. Then they're here trying to find their identity. And you see even adults in your college classes who aren't the same person, or aren't the person they thought they were when they were 20, and are coming back for new degrees. People are always struggling to find their identity, and it's something that'll probably be there for the rest of time. And this kind of semi-relates to another theme that I also find very relevant today, which was that our narrator / black people in the book were being used like pawns in a chess game. Our narrator is used as a speaker. Our narrator is used even as a fighter in the beginning. Author of How Beowulf Can Save America, Robin Bates, writes about this. Virtually everyone, black and white alike, wants to use him, to make him over in their own image, to turn him into a portent, a warning, a threat, a possibility. Has not the same thing happened to Trayvon Martin in the last few weeks? And in that review, it actually hit me pretty hard that, Trayvon Martin, whatever happened to him, that was kind of in the same way people started using him. And it wasn't in a bad way, but people started using him as something to rally against, a hero, a cause, all these things that maybe he probably hadn't intended to be, but his situation brought him to be. That brought me to the point that it was very similar to Clifton. When Clifton died, our narrator turns him into the same thing almost Trayvon Martin turned. And you can see how what happened then in the book is also happening today in 2017. Overall, I found that the themes in the book, such as dealing with racism, being used, and trying to find one's own identity, are very relevant back in 1952 when the book was written, and today. And I very strongly believe that they will still be relevant in the future. Because Ellison writes this not only as a black novel, but can be applicable to anybody going through the human experience, I enjoyed the book and suggest everyone give it a read.